During the late Jurassic, between 155 and 145 million years ago, the continents had not yet fully separated, and vast stretches of land were still part of the supercontinent Laurasia. In what today corresponds to the semi-arid plains of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, the Morrison Formation housed some of the largest terrestrial animals that ever existed. There, in an environment dominated by conifer forests, tree ferns, dense undergrowth, and seasons marked by prolonged droughts, walked two giants whose mere presence completely altered the landscape, Apatosaurus and Diplodocus. Both were sauropods, members of that lineage of long-necked herbivores that reached sizes no other terrestrial vertebrate has ever matched. Apatosaurus was a robust animal with massive cervical vertebrae, thick limbs, and a generally heavier build than its relative Diplodocus. Paleontologists have estimated that some individuals surpassed 23 meters in length and 30 tons in weight, dimensions that required an enormous energetic investment to survive. Each step of Apatosaurus stirred the earth and compacted the soil, creating paths and clearings that other species used to access feeding areas. Its neck, composed of relatively short but powerful vertebrae, allowed for a more limited range of motion, so its plant-consuming strategy focused on mid-level vegetation, branches at intermediate heights, probably between 2 and 5 meters according to biomechanical reconstructions. Diplodocus, by contrast, had a more slender body design. Reaching up to 27 meters in the largest specimens, it featured a more flexible neck and a tail that, according to some studies, may have broken the sound barrier when used as a defensive whip. This extremely elongated tail served as a natural counterbalance, allowing the neck to move with greater freedom. Diplodocus consumed lower-lying vegetation, ferns, shrub growth cycles, and low riparian plants, placing it in a distinct ecological category within the same ecosystem. Its pencil-shaped teeth, concentrated at the front of the snout, suggest a technique of selective stripping, pulling off small portions of plants without fully grinding them. The anatomical differences between these two giants were decisive in preventing direct competition for the same resources. Ecological partitioning allowed several species of sauropods to coexist for millions of years without collapsing their own environment. While Apatosaurus broke branches and consumed plant material that required jaw strength, Diplodocus moved with sweeping neck motions to graze broad areas of greenery. Their complementary functions created a cycle of vegetation regeneration in which certain plants thrived thanks to the feeding behavior of these giant herbivores. Paleontologists have confirmed that their behavior shaped not only the vegetation, but also the hydrology of the landscape. Around rivers and alluvial plains, the trails carved by sauropods diverted smaller watercourses. During the dry season, when competition for resources was most intense, Apatosaurus herds likely moved toward areas with more stable access to mid-height vegetation. Diplodocus herds, for their part, migrated along lines of low vegetation near water sources. The movement of hundreds of tons of living biomass across the ecosystem caused soil compaction, dispersal of spores and seeds that adhered to their skin or digestive tract, and the opening of corridors that other species used to travel while avoiding denser vegetation. The morphology of their limbs, column-like in structure, showed adaptations for bearing immense loads. The metacarpal bones formed a compact, rigid semicircle ideal for distributing weight. This structure, combined with a steady but relatively slow gait, turned each journey into a physical modification of the terrain. For the carnivores that coexisted with them, such as Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, these paths were valuable routes. They facilitated faster movement in search of prey or carcasses. Studies of coprolites and analyses of preserved thoracic cavities suggest that Apatosaurus and Diplodocus developed an extremely efficient fermentative digestive system. They consumed enormous amounts of plant material with low nutritional quality, which had to decompose over long periods inside large digestive chambers, perhaps analogous to the rumen of modern mammals, but more complex. This process generated gases and heat, which may have made these animals especially dependent on shade and water during the hottest hours. The constant interaction between feeding, movement, and thermoregulation defined daily patterns that directly influenced the activity cycles of other species in the Morrison. As Apatosaurus populations expanded, their presence transformed entire regions. Their enormous weight toppled mature vegetation and created clearings where new plant species could grow. This process, repeated over generations, acted as a natural mechanism for ecosystem maintenance. Diplodocus complemented this function by consuming young plants and preventing ferns or shrubs from becoming dominant. The alternation between intensive herbivory and plant regeneration shaped a landscape in permanent reconfiguration. Frenzied neck movements, the cracking of branches, and whip-like tail blasts in alarm must have echoed for kilometers. The sounds they produced, although impossible to reconstruct with certainty, were likely dominated by low resonant frequencies generated by their enormous thoracic chambers. These vibrations may have served as a form of communication to warn about predators or to coordinate group movements. If Apatosaurus detected danger, the impact of its footsteps on the ground was enough for other sauropods, even at great distances, to perceive the signal through waves transmitted across the terrain. In the fossil record, the abundance of remains from both sauropods shows that they were not rare species but dominant ones in their ecosystem. Their evolutionary success indicates remarkable ecological stability, sustained by differentiated feeding patterns and by gregarious behavior that enabled survival in highly seasonal environments. The Morrison was a mosaic of patches of vegetation in which constant mobility was essential to maximize feeding opportunities. Apatosaurus and Diplodocus, with gigantic bodies but distinct strategies, managed to do so without drastically interfering with each other's food sources. Over millions of years, these interactions generated a dynamic balance between resources, herbivores, and predators. The disappearance of these giants at the end of the Jurassic was not due to a lack of success, but to gradual climatic and ecological changes that altered vegetation types and moisture patterns, transforming the Morrison into an environment less favorable for giant sauropods. Nevertheless, throughout their reign, Apatosaurus and Diplodocus were true ecosystem engineers, carving the landscape with each step and defining the food chain from the most basic level of vegetation to the apex predators. One final characteristic set them apart: their longevity. It is estimated that these sauropods could live for more than a century, accumulating experience in migratory routes and safe areas. Their young, vulnerable during the first years, depended on the intimidating size of the herd to deter attacks. The continuity of this social structure was key to producing generations of giant herbivores that maintained plant diversity and at the same time provided abundant carrion whenever one of these titans fell. The impact they left on late Jurassic ecosystems was so profound that when studying the Morrison Formation, paleontologists recognize that much of its ecological dynamics is incomprehensible without considering the central role of Apatosaurus and Diplodocus. Brachiosaurus and its impressive height, how its anatomy defied gravity. In the heart of the late Jurassic, while Apatosaurus and Diplodocus roamed the plains in search of low and mid-level vegetation, an even more imposing creature dominated the upper strata of the forest: Brachiosaurus, the titan whose proportions forever redefined the limits of terrestrial gigantism. This sauropod, first identified from remains found in the Morrison Formation and later compared with African species of the genus Giraffatitan, stood out for an unprecedented anatomical feature: its colossal height, which reached between 12 and 15 meters at the top of the back and could surpass 20 meters when it raised its neck, making it one of the tallest terrestrial herbivores that ever existed. Unlike most sauropods, which had longer hind limbs than forelimbs, Brachiosaurus displayed an almost inverted configuration. Its forelimbs were notably longer and more robust, tilting its body upward as if it were perpetually stretched to reach levels of vegetation that other sauropods could never touch. This pattern recalled, in a way, the posture of a modern giraffe, but taken to an inconceivable scale. The natural elevation of the torso allowed the neck to rise almost vertically, without the biomechanical effort required to hold it horizontally for long periods. The neck of Brachiosaurus, composed of 13 elongated and hollow cervical vertebrae, functioned as a bony crane designed to minimize weight without sacrificing strength. These vertebrae, filled with pneumatic cavities connected to the respiratory system, reduced their mass by more than 60%, an essential adaptation to prevent the mere act of holding up the head from becoming an unsustainable energetic cost. The air sacs extending through the torso and neck, similar to those of modern birds, acted as an efficient ventilation system that allowed continuous airflow and reduced muscular fatigue. The head of Brachiosaurus, small in proportion to its body, housed a set of spatula-shaped teeth ideal for stripping foliage with high fibrous content. It did not chew its food. Instead, it tore it off and swallowed it almost unprocessed, relying on a gigantic digestive system to slowly break down the plant material. The arrangement of the teeth and the shape of the snout suggest that its diet included conifer leaves, araucaria needles, and possibly softer plant material obtained from the tender upper canopies of Jurassic trees. But the true marvel of Brachiosaurus lay not only in its ability to reach heights inaccessible to other animals, it also resided in its physiological strength to defy gravity. Raising blood to its brain, located more than 6 meters above the heart, required monumental blood pressure. Biomechanical studies estimate that to accomplish this task, Brachiosaurus must have possessed a heart weighing hundreds of kilograms, with extremely thick muscular walls and a pumping power unmatched in the animal kingdom. The cardiovascular system probably included additional valves in the neck arteries to prevent blood backflow and ensure a constant supply to the brain. This exceptional physiology had direct consequences on its behavior. Brachiosaurus likely avoided sudden neck movements or abrupt downward tilts, since shifts in blood pressure could affect cerebral irrigation. Its rhythm of life, therefore, must have been slow, steady, and almost ceremonial. Every movement was measured, every lift of the neck calculated. A creature of such dimensions could not afford to waste energy or risk destabilizing its circulatory system. The influence of Brachiosaurus on Jurassic ecosystems was profound. By feeding on tree canopies, it acted as a natural regulator of arboreal growth. Its constant pruning of high branches allowed light to penetrate the lower levels, facilitating the development of ferns, horsetails, and shrubs that other species used as food. The Jurassic forest was a network of vegetative strata, and Brachiosaurus occupied the highest of all, reshaping the plant architecture with each bite. Its migratory routes, presumably long and guided by seasonal food availability, also contributed to large-scale seed dispersal. Plant fragments it consumed could pass through its digestive tract for days before being expelled as enriched organic masses capable of fertilizing the soil where they landed. The combined effect of its feeding, movement, and digestive cycle made this creature a fundamental ecological agent, responsible for maintaining the dynamism of the forests it inhabited. Well adapted to towering above the landscape, Brachiosaurus likely lived in medium-sized social groups, numerous enough to protect young individuals but not so large as to devastate a region's resources quickly. Its intimidating presence kept many predators at bay, though it was not entirely free from danger. Allosaurus and other large theropods could attack calves or juveniles attracted by carrion or weakened individuals, although confronting a healthy adult was nearly suicidal. The monumental size of the sauropod served as its primary defense, and a strike from its long, powerful forelimbs could crush an unwary hunter. The impressive height of Brachiosaurus also created a unique visual effect in its time. In the midst of dense forests, their heads rose above the canopy like living towers dominating the horizon. The synchronized movements of several individuals must have created a fascinating spectacle. Giants that, without any haste, cast their shadows across the terrain as they fed from the treetops, while the rest of the ecosystem continued its course beneath them. The sensory and environmental impact of their presence transformed the Morrison into a stage where life acquired almost mythical dimensions. Despite its physical might, Brachiosaurus faced significant climatic challenges. Prolonged droughts reduced the availability of tall vegetation, forcing it to travel great distances in search of food. Under such conditions, its size could be both an advantage and a burden. It could access exclusive food sources, but required immense quantities of vegetation to sustain its metabolism. Recent studies suggest that it needed to consume hundreds of kilograms of plant material per day, an amount that limited the number of individuals capable of surviving in the same area. The enormous energy demand also influenced its development. Brachiosaurus likely grew rapidly during its early years, reaching colossal sizes in relatively short periods to reduce vulnerability to predators. This accelerated growth must have been supported by a combination of elevated metabolism and a vegetation-rich environment. conditions that the Jurassic Morrison could provide but which could also fluctuate depending on climatic cycles. Allosaurus, the top predator of the Jurassic and its dominance in the food chain. In the vast territories of the Morrison Formation, where giant sauropods reshaped the landscape with every step, there existed a figure that dominated the food chain with a lethal combination of strength, speed, and strategy. Allosaurus, the supreme predator of the late Jurassic. This theropod, reaching up to 9 meters in length and more than 1.5 tons in weight in the largest specimens, represented the culmination of millions of years of evolution aimed at forging an efficient hunter capable of facing colossal prey in a world where gigantism was the norm. The anatomy of Allosaurus revealed a creature built for controlled aggression. Its skull, more than 60 centimeters long, contained wide openings that lightened its weight, allowing for rapid movements. Its jaws, though less robust than those of later theropods such as Tyrannosaurus, possessed a remarkable biomechanical feature. They could open extremely wide thanks to a flexible joint in the skull, reaching large angles that allowed it to deliver quick bites, more akin to axe blows than to the crushing bites of other predators. Rather than pulverizing flesh, it tore it, ripping off large chunks of tissue that were then processed with movements of the neck. The teeth of Allosaurus, sharp as blades and serrated, were designed to cut flesh with precision. Each time one broke, a frequent occurrence when attacking enormous prey, another grew in its place, ensuring an always functional dentition. Its long, muscular hind limbs allowed speeds estimated between 30 and 35 kilometers per hour, sufficient for short ambushes or for pursuing weakened prey. Its arms, though not as imposing as those of some Cretaceous predators, were surprisingly strong and ended in curved claws capable of gripping, tearing, or stabilizing the animal as it lunged at larger prey. But individual strength alone does not fully explain its success. Fossil evidence such as bite marks on sauropod bones of different ages and wear patterns on the skeletons of juvenile Allosaurus suggest a more complex social behavior. Although they likely did not hunt in coordinated packs like modern mammals, they may have practiced some level of opportunistic group hunting in which several individuals gathered around a weakened prey or a recent carcass. This type of interaction, more chaotic than strategic, would have increased their chances of obtaining food in an ecosystem where adult prey could reach 20, 30, or even 40 tons in weight. The interaction between Allosaurus and the giant herbivores defined much of the ecological dynamics of the Morrison. Facing a healthy adult Apatosaurus or Diplodocus was virtually impossible. A single tail swipe or a swing of the hind limbs could break bones or send the predator flying. For this reason, Allosaurus focused its attacks primarily on young, sick, or isolated individuals. The constant pressure from the predator kept the herds moving, forcing them to migrate to avoid dangerous areas. This behavior not only prevented the overexploitation of a territory, but also stimulated plant growth by allowing rest and regeneration cycles. The attack tactics of Allosaurus varied depending on the type of prey. With Stegosaurs, armored and equipped with plates and spiked tails, the predator likely attempted to attack from the flanks, avoiding the tail, which could inflict deadly wounds. Paleontological evidence shows Allosaurus vertebrae with injuries consistent with blows from Stegosaurs, direct proof of the danger involved in hunting these defensive herbivores. With young sauropods, on the other hand, the strategy would have been to exhaust them through repeated bites that caused blood loss and weakened the prey before attempting to bring it down. The biomechanics of the neck played a crucial role in its method of attack. Modern studies using digital models reveal that Allosaurus could perform extremely powerful swinging movements, capable of generating deep cuts by combining cervical strength with the sharpness of its teeth. This combat style, based on precise strikes rather than crushing jaw torsions, made it an agile predator, ideal for taking advantage of any opportunity in an environment full of slow but powerful herbivores. Despite its apparent supremacy, Allosaurus was not invulnerable. It competed with other large theropods, such as Ceratosaurus and Torvosaurus. Ceratosaurus, lower and more robust, occupied niches near riverine areas and probably specialized in smaller prey or carrion. Torvosaurus, with a heavier build and stronger jaws, may have directly challenged Allosaurus on some occasions. The coexistence of these three predators suggests a functional division of the ecosystem, where each one played a specific role, avoiding constant conflicts over food. Fossil evidence indicates that Allosaurus was abundant, revealing remarkable evolutionary success. Its remains, found in different sedimentary layers, demonstrate that it dominated its environment for millions of years. This success was not limited to its hunting ability, it was also resistant to severe injuries. Some skulls show healed fractures, and vertebrae with signs of recovered infections indicate that these predators could survive significant damage, likely thanks to a robust physiology and an active metabolism that allowed them to recover quickly. The growth of Allosaurus also followed a rapid pattern during its early years, which was common among large theropods. The faster it reached adult size, the lower the risk of being attacked by other predators. This created evolutionary pressure that favored individuals with greater metabolic efficiency and physical resilience, consolidating the lineage of this predator as one of the most successful of the Jurassic. The interaction of Allosaurus with its environment was not limited to the act of hunting. Its presence directly influenced the behavior of prey and, therefore, the structure of ecosystems. Entire herds changed their routes upon detecting olfactory or visual signs of its presence. The carcasses from its attacks fed smaller scavengers, reptiles, small mammals, and other opportunistic predators. Its activity contributed to nutrient recycling, accelerating the biogeochemical cycles of the environment. The footprints it left in riverbeds and clay soils show trajectories that indicate regular movement patterns, perhaps linked to defined territories or seasonal migrations in search of areas with greater prey density. In an era where resources fluctuated according to climatic cycles, the ability to adapt to changing territories ensured its permanence as a dominant predator. Stegosaurus, the armored giant, and the mystery of its dorsal plates. In a landscape dominated by colossal herbivores and formidable predators, a creature emerged whose silhouette resembled nothing else on Earth. Stegosaurus, the armored giant of the late Jurassic. Reaching up to 9 meters in length, weighing around 3 tons and possessing a brain surprisingly small in proportion to its body, this herbivore demonstrated that evolution often follows unpredictable paths. Although it never matched the size of the sauropods nor the ferocity of the theropods, Stegosaurus became one of the most iconic dinosaurs thanks to its dorsal plates, structures as enigmatic as they were striking, whose purpose remains debated. Native to the Morrison Formation, just like Apatosaurus, Allosaurus, and other emblematic lineages of the late Jurassic, Stegosaurus inhabited open areas, primitive grasslands, and forest clearings where low vegetation was abundant. Its narrow snout and small triangular teeth indicate that it preferred relatively soft plants, such as ferns, cycads, and tender shrub shoots. Its short neck and sloping posture, with hind limbs longer than the front ones, suggest that its feeding was focused primarily on vegetation close to the ground. However, the most striking feature of Stegosaurus has always been its dorsal plates. Up to 17 of these bony structures arranged in 2 alternating rows, running along its back from the neck to the base of the tail. Over more than a century of research, various theories have been proposed regarding their function. One of the earliest suggested a defensive role, as if the plates served as a natural shield. But this hypothesis lost strength when it was discovered that the plates were not firmly anchored to the skeleton, but rather embedded in the skin, formed by highly vascularized bone tissue that was surprisingly fragile for withstanding strong impacts. The vascularization revealed another possible purpose: thermoregulation. The plates, traversed by a complex network of blood vessels, may have acted as living radiators, helping the animal dissipate heat during the warmest hours or absorb it during cool mornings. If Stegosaurus lived in semi-arid areas with intense temperature fluctuations, this adaptation would have been especially valuable. Some studies have shown that when exposed to direct sunlight, the plates may have slightly changed color due to blood flow, an intriguing detail that suggests an even more sophisticated physiological control. Other interpretations point to visual communication. The alternating design of the plates, their large size, and their possible ability to flush red or orange during moments of tension may have served as signals to other stegosaurs. In a world where sight was a crucial sense for survival, striking visual displays could have played a central role in courtship, individual recognition, or intimidating predators. The dinosaur's spiked silhouette would have appeared imposing even to a hungry Allosaurus, especially if the animal wounded a plate during a confrontation and it began to bleed, creating an intimidating visual spectacle. Although the plates captured most of the attention, the true weapon of Stegosaurus was found at the opposite end, the thagomizer, the tail armed with 4 long, sharp, conical spikes capable of inflicting severe injuries. Unlike the plates, the spikes were firmly attached to the skeleton and sturdy enough to penetrate bone. Several Allosaurus vertebrae found with puncture wounds match the size and shape of these spikes, direct evidence that Stegosaurus could defend itself lethally. The hip muscles and lateral movement of the tail allowed the spikes to swing in wide arcs with devastating power. Biomechanical studies suggest that a well-aimed tail strike could reach considerable speeds, turning it into a powerful deterrent for any predator. However, its effectiveness relied on both precision and opportunity. Stegosaurus was slow and lacked the agility of a predator, so it needed to maneuver its entire body to aim. Even so, in a close encounter, an overly confident Allosaurus could end up seriously injured. The daily life of Stegosaurus unfolded between foraging, moving between areas with low vegetation, and protecting its young. Although its brain, approximately the size of a large walnut, has long been the subject of fascination and historical misconceptions that portrayed it as the clumsiest dinosaur, current evidence suggests that this herbivore had sensory abilities sufficient for survival in its environment. Its olfactory system was functional, its hearing and vision adequate, and its behavior likely included basic group defense rituals and perhaps coordinated visual signals using plate movements. There is no conclusive evidence that it lived in large herds, but remains found in close proximity suggest some degree of social life, even if occasional. The presence of juveniles with relatively small plates, less vascularized than those of adults, indicates that these structures grew with the individual and that their visual or thermoregulatory function became more relevant as the animal reached maturity. The body of Stegosaurus also presents a unique detail. Its center of mass was located very close to the hips, which gave it stability on uneven terrain. Although it was not a fast runner, it could move with solid, steady steps, especially when forced to defend a territory or move away from a predator. Its front limbs were shorter and sturdier, adapted to a lifestyle that combined endurance, stability, and the ability to lift the front part of the body slightly when needing to reach higher vegetation or display itself more intimidatingly. In the late Jurassic ecosystem, Stegosaurus played a fundamental role as a low-browsing herbivore, contributing to the maintenance of open areas and helping control the proliferation of ground-level plants. This activity allowed other species to take advantage of the cleared spaces and maintained a vegetational balance that directly influenced migratory routes and feeding patterns of sauropods and other herbivores. The enigma surrounding its plates remains one of the most fascinating debates in paleontology. Each new excavation adds further details, reinforcing the idea that these structures served multiple functions at once. Thermoregulation, visual signaling, intimidation, social display, all are possible and perhaps they coexisted. Evolution rarely acts with a single purpose. Supersaurus and the records of length, the longest dinosaurs ever discovered. In the already colossal setting of the late Jurassic, where Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Brachiosaurus dominated the landscape like living mountains, a sauropod emerged whose length challenged even the limits of the imaginable. Supersaurus, one of the longest creatures to have ever existed on the face of the Earth. Its body, stretching like a natural bridge, may have reached more than 39 meters, according to modern estimates based on exceptionally well-preserved remains found in the Morrison Formation. In terms of extreme length, no other known dinosaur, except perhaps Amphicoelias, according to highly debated hypotheses, comes close with certainty to this serpentine biological marvel. Supersaurus belonged to the family Diplodocidae, placing it within the lineage of sauropods with exaggeratedly long tails and flexible necks. However, it differed from its famous relative Diplodocus in having more robust proportions, slightly thicker cervical vertebrae, a more resistant body structure, and overall dimensions that surpassed nearly everything ever recorded. Its name, given in 1972 after the initial discovery in Colorado, was neither an exaggeration nor a sensationalist resource. It was simply a literal description of what it represented, an enormous reptile even within an era characterized by gigantism. The cervical vertebrae of Supersaurus are among the longest individual fossils ever documented, with pieces exceeding 1.2 meters each. Its neck, possibly over 15 meters long, allowed it to cover vast areas of vegetation without needing to move its entire body. Unlike other more vertical sauropods such as Brachiosaurus, the neck of Supersaurus extended forward in a broad horizontal arc, suggesting a feeding strategy based on extensive sweeps at mid-height. The tail, meanwhile, was a masterpiece of evolutionary design, long, flexible, and adapted to balance the enormous extension of the neck. Like Diplodocus, Supersaurus may have been capable of generating whip-like movements, although it is uncertain whether it reached the same acoustic power. Even so, its sheer length made this appendage a formidable defensive tool against predators such as Allosaurus or Pterosaurus. A single impact, even without reaching the speed of sound, would have been strong enough to deter any attacker. The body mass of Supersaurus, although gigantic, did not reach the extreme levels of other, more compact and heavier sauropods like Argentinosaurus. Its greatness lay in its length, not in total weight. This combination of a relatively lightweight body and extreme dimensions made it a surprisingly efficient herbivore in terms of mobility. Although slow compared to predators, it could move regularly in search of vegetation and water sources without becoming immobilized by its own size. The ecosystem of the Morrison Formation provided the ideal environment for an animal like this. Large expanses of open forests, riverbanks, and plains covered with conifers and giant ferns guaranteed enough resources to feed a creature capable of consuming hundreds of kilograms of plant material per day. The movements of Supersaurus, along with those of other giant sauropods, would have constantly modified the vegetation, knocking down branches, opening pathways, and facilitating the growth of new plants. Its role as an ecosystem engineer must have been as relevant as that of its better-known relatives. Fossil evidence indicates that these animals did not roam alone. Although there is no direct proof of complex social structures, bones of different individuals have been found relatively close to one another in similar sedimentary layers, suggesting some degree of group behavior or, at the very least, coinciding seasonal movements. A herd of Supersaurus would have been an extraordinary sight, endless lines of necks and tails moving in unison, marking the landscape like living geological forces. The weight and size of Supersaurus implied a particular physiology. Like other sauropods, it likely possessed an air sac system similar to that of birds, which efficiently ventilated its body, reduced bone density, and facilitated breathing. These sacs also acted as thermal regulators, a vital adaptation for large animals exposed to high temperatures. Without this system, the body mass would have been unsustainable. The pneumatic skeleton, light yet strong, was the evolutionary secret that allowed species in this family to reach sizes never before seen. Reproduction for such a large animal must have been marked by periods of high vulnerability. It is estimated that Supersaurus laid relatively small eggs compared to its size, a common pattern among dinosaurs, and that it deposited communal nests to maximize the survival chances of the young. Juveniles, born with bodies tiny relative to adults, required years of accelerated growth to reach sizes that made them less susceptible to predators. During that period, they were tempting prey for Allosaurus and other medium-sized theropods. Once adulthood was reached, however, size became their best defense. A fully grown Supersaurus became an unlikely target. The energy required to bring it down, the difficulty of inflicting continuous injury, and the risk of retaliation meant that predators focused on more manageable prey. As a result, adults likely enjoyed long lives, spanning several decades. The extreme length of Supersaurus also generated a fascinating debate in modern paleontology. For years, it was believed that many giant vertebrae belonged to different species, until more recent studies demonstrated that several of them were part of a single extraordinarily large individual. These discoveries cemented Supersaurus as the longest dinosaur confirmed with solid evidence. While some fragmentary remains of Amphicoelius fragilimus suggest an even greater size, their extremely deteriorated state prevents confirmation. Supersaurus, in contrast, is supported by verifiable bones and detailed analyses. At an ecological level, its existence demonstrates the extent to which late Jurassic resources could sustain disproportionate forms of life. It also illustrates the functional diversity within sauropods. While some were robust and compact, others favored verticality, and some, like Supersaurus, extended their bodies to lengths that challenge human imagination. Walking beside one of these giants would have been equivalent to walking next to a living train. The distance between its head and its tail was so enormous that even experienced predators could lose sight of one end while watching the other. When a herd moved, it caused a total alteration of the terrain, displaced sediments, shifted trees, dust suspended in the air, and a deep vibration that traveled through the ground for kilometers around. Despite its size, the extinction of Supersaurus was neither dramatic nor sudden. Gradual changes in climate, vegetation, and ecosystem structure led to the disappearance of many giant sauropods at the end of the Jurassic. Megalosaurus, one of the first dinosaurs studied by modern science. Long before names like Tyrannosaurus, Diplodocus, or Allosaurus dominated the popular imagination, there was a dinosaur whose discovery marked a turning point in scientific history: Megalosaurus, the first to be formally described in academic literature as a dinosaur, decades before the word dinosauria even existed. Although it lived in the Middle Jurassic, around 166 million years ago, its importance transcends its era and stands at the very foundations of modern paleontology. Megalosaurus was a carnivorous theropod about 9 meters long, belonging to a primitive yet powerful lineage, the Megalosaurids. Its remains have been found mainly in England, especially in the Stonesfield Quarry near Oxford, a site that in the 19th century became the epicenter of one of the most significant discoveries in natural history. Although the skeleton uncovered was incomplete, fragments of jaw, vertebrae, and limb bones, its size and morphology allowed scientists to infer the existence of a gigantic reptile, utterly different from any known animal of the time. In 1824, Reverend and geologist William Buckland published the formal description of Megalosaurus before the Geological Society of London. His conclusions revolutionized the scientific view of deep time. He stated that gigantic creatures extinct for millions of years had dominated the Earth long before human existence. Buckland imagined it as a huge, heavy reptile, similar to a colossal lizard crawling along the ground. This model, although we now know it was incorrect, represented a historic moment, the first time science recognized a dinosaur as such, even if the word had not yet been coined. The conception of Megalosaurus evolved over time. Richard Owen, the naturalist who would later coin the term Dinosauria in 1842, used Megalosaurus remains as one of the key examples to define this new and extraordinary category of terribly large reptiles. However, Owen also imagined Megalosaurus as a heavy quadrupedal animal, an interpretation influenced by early reconstructions of massive reptiles, still lacking a modern understanding of dinosaur biomechanics. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that paleontologists began to recognize the true form of Megalosaurus, a bipedal predator, agile, muscular, and perfectly adapted for hunting. Its skull, solidly built and equipped with curved, serrated teeth, was ideal for tearing flesh. The jaws, although less powerful than those of more advanced theropods, could inflict deep, rapid wounds, an effective attack strategy in a world where prey might be armored or massive. Modern studies place Megalosaurus as an active hunter in European environments dominated by dense forests, wetlands, and coastal plains. Its habitat included lagoons, deltas, and intertidal zones, meaning it likely alternated between firm and muddy terrain. This environmental diversity forced it to be a versatile predator, capable of both ambushes and short pursuits. The structure of its hind limbs shows a balance between strength and speed, suggesting an opportunistic hunting style. Megalosaurus shared its environment with other theropods, such as Cruxiceros and Streptospondylus, as well as herbivores like early European sauropods and primitive stegosaurs. This coexistence shows that the Middle Jurassic ecosystem was dynamic and complex, with well-defined food webs in which each predator played a specific role. Megalosaurus, by virtue of its size and body structure, likely acted as one of the top super predators of its time. The lower jaw of this dinosaur, one of the most iconic fossils in the British record, measures over 70 centimeters and contains large, extremely sharp teeth. These teeth show wear patterns indicating intensive use during hunting. It is likely that Megalosaurus attacked its prey from the flanks, delivering quick, deep bites before retreating to avoid counterattacks. This technique, similar to that of major theropods of the late Jurassic, made it a formidable and efficient predator. Interestingly, Megalosaurus was not as gigantic as some of its later relatives. However, its robustness and biology made it a dominant predator. Its evolutionary success is reflected in the wide distribution of megalosaurs during the Jurassic, a lineage that occupied Europe, Africa, and possibly South America. This expansion demonstrates the adaptability of this group to different environmental conditions. The scientific history of Megalosaurus is also marked by interpretative errors that became part of early paleontology. For decades, museum reconstructions depicted the dinosaur as a quadrupedal, heavy-bodied reptile with a clumsy appearance, based on models that are now considered obsolete. A monumental statue was even created in the Crystal Palace Gardens in London, where Megalosaurus appears as a gigantic lizard with short limbs. These representations, though incorrect, stand as a testament to the evolution of scientific thought and how the public's perception of dinosaurs changed over time. The modern reinterpretation of Megalosaurus required a detailed analysis of every fossil fragment, comparisons with other theropods, and the use of advanced computational tools. This process revealed that Megalosaurus was more agile than previously believed and possessed a skeletal structure suited to an active predatory lifestyle. Its narrow pelvis, reinforced vertebrae, and limb morphology indicate a competent runner adapted for quick turns and precise lunges. Its role in the Middle Jurassic European ecosystem may also have included scavenging, a common behavior among large theropods. The combination of active hunting and opportunistic feeding ensured its success in environments where resources fluctuated due to seasonal climatic variations. The European fauna of its time included a diverse plant life, changing sea levels, and the constant evolution of herbivores, factors that forced Megalosaurus to remain highly adaptable. The importance of Megalosaurus in the history of science lies not only in its biology but also in its cultural legacy. Its discovery sparked an intellectual revolution that led to the emergence of paleontology as a formal discipline. It was the first dinosaur to be scientifically described, the first to be recognized as a gigantic reptile, and one of the foundational pillars upon which our modern understanding of the prehistoric world was built. Without Megalosaurus, the consolidation of the concept of dinosaur would likely have taken much longer to establish. Camarasaurus, behavior, diet, and its central role in the Jurassic landscape. Across the vast plains and open woodlands of the late Jurassic, within the now legendary Morrison Formation, there existed a sauropod that, although it did not reach the colossal size of Supersaurus or the majestic height of Brachiosaurus, became one of the most common, adaptable, and successful herbivores of its time, Camarasaurus. Its name, meaning chambered reptile, refers to the internal cavities in its vertebrae, a feature that lightened the weight of its skeletal structure without sacrificing strength. This combination of robustness and reduced mass made it a key component of the Jurassic ecosystems of North America. Camarasaurus measured between 15 and 18 meters in length and reached a weight of around 20 tons. Its robust body, moderately long neck, and proportionally large head set it apart from more slender sauropods such as Diplodocus. The square shape of its snout, combined with thick, spatula-shaped teeth, indicates a more generalist diet. While other long-necked species specialized in soft foliage, Camarasaurus possessed the ideal equipment for grinding tougher vegetation such as branches and hard shoots from conifers, araucarians, and cycads. This trait granted it access to less contested food sources, reducing direct competition with other giant herbivores. The characteristic wear on its teeth shows that it exerted considerable biting pressure, something unusual among sauropods, most of which relied on internal digestive processes rather than extensive oral processing. Its powerful lower jaw, together with its well-developed cranial musculature, suggests the ability to tear fibrous vegetation that other herbivores ignored. Its digestive system, likely complex and fermentation-based, complemented this feeding strategy, extracting nutrients with high efficiency. Although it was neither the largest nor the most visually striking sauropod, Camarasaurus is by far the most abundant in the Morrison fossil record. This abundance indicates remarkable ecological success. Its dietary versatility and more compact body allowed it to thrive in a range of environments: semi-arid plains, riverine forests, and areas with mixed vegetation. While Diplodocus required wide corridors and plentiful low-lying plant matter, and Brachiosaurus depended on extensive forests to browse treetops, Camarasaurus could survive across a broader spectrum of conditions. Its adaptability was its greatest evolutionary advantage. The social behavior of Camarasaurus remains under study, but the discovery of multiple individuals together, including both adults and juveniles, suggests some degree of group living. It likely moved in small herds or family units that coordinated their movement between feeding areas. The presence of fossilized nests and juvenile remains associated with groups indicates that parental care may have been more significant than once assumed for sauropods, perhaps with adults protecting the young during migrations. Anatomically, one of the most distinctive traits of Camarasaurus is the shape of its skull. Unlike the elongated, delicate skulls of Diplodocus, its skull was short, solid, and rounded, with large orbital openings. This gave it a stronger bite and sensory capabilities well suited to its lifestyle. The placement of the nasal openings, high on the snout, has generated debate, but many studies suggest it possessed a reasonable degree of olfactory sensitivity. This would have helped it locate food, water, and chemical cues from other members of its species. Its neck, though shorter than that of other sauropods, offered a good range of mobility. This allowed it to feed both on understory vegetation and on mid-level plants. The result was a mosaic of feeding heights that Camarasaurus could exploit to avoid direct competition. Its very presence shaped the environment. By consuming a wide variety of plants, it facilitated the regeneration of smaller species by preventing shrubs or young trees from forming dense vegetative barriers. As a dominant herbivore, Camarasaurus was also a fundamental part of the diet of the largest predators, such as Allosaurus and Pterosaurs. Fossil remains show bite marks that match the teeth of these theropods, indicating that both weakened adults and juveniles could fall victim to coordinated attacks or ambushes. However, a healthy adult, given its imposing size and considerable mass, posed a challenge even for a group of theropods. The predator's chances of success increased when Camarasaurus was forced to cross muddy areas or travel with more vulnerable offspring. The ecological impact of Camarasaurus was not limited to feeding. Its weight, comparable to that of a modern truck, created natural pathways that facilitated the movement of smaller animals. Its role as an ecosystem gardener helped maintain the structure of the landscape. The mixture of clearings, dense patches, and fragmented vegetation characteristic of the late Jurassic was largely the result of the combined action of herbivores like Camarasaurus. The reproduction of this sauropod remains partly enigmatic. Like other dinosaurs, it presumably laid eggs, but their relatively small size compared to the adult suggests that hatchlings were extremely vulnerable. Juvenile mortality must have been high, compensated either by a considerable number of eggs per season or by some degree of group protection. The recurring presence of young individuals in fossil sites suggests that Camarasaurus reached adulthood after a period of rapid initial growth, an evolutionary strategy common among large prehistoric herbivores. The abundance of Camarasaurus fossils has enabled more complete anatomical reconstructions than those of many other sauropods. Skeleton after skeleton, paleontologists have been able to compare individuals of different ages, revealing morphological changes related to growth. This has allowed researchers to deduce developmental patterns and has made Camarasaurus one of the best understood sauropods in modern science. When analyzing its role in the ecosystem, it becomes clear that Camarasaurus acted as a stabilizing force within the Morrison Formation. Its ability to thrive in diverse environments made it an ecological anchor. When resources dwindled for more specialized herbivores, Camarasaurus continued to survive, maintaining vegetation pressure and ensuring the basic functioning of the ecosystem. This resilience was essential for sustaining the complex trophic networks involving both giant predators and smaller mammals and reptiles. Marine giants of the Jurassic, Plesiosaurs and Ichthyosaurs, the titans of the oceans. While sauropods reshaped the Jurassic plains and theropods reigned as terrestrial predators, the oceans, much warmer and more extensive than today, hosted their own giants. In these deep waters, where currents carried nutrients from submarine volcanoes and young continental shelves, two lineages of marine reptiles swam and dominated for tens of millions of years, Plesiosaurs and Ichthyosaurs. They were not dinosaurs, but their colossal bodies, masterfully adapted to aquatic life, made them true rulers of the Jurassic seas. The Ichthyosaurs, whose name means fish lizards, represented the most spectacular example of convergent evolution between reptiles and modern cetaceans. They were hydrodynamic creatures, with sleek, spindle-shaped bodies capable of moving with a speed and elegance worthy of a dolphin. During the early Jurassic, some ichthyosaurs reached lengths of up to 21 meters, but in the late Jurassic, most ranged from 3 to 10 meters. Even so, their hunting abilities and mobility placed them among the most formidable predators of their time. One of the best-known genera of the Middle and Late Jurassic was Ophthalmosaurus, famous for having colossal eyes, over 20 centimeters in diameter in some specimens, the largest relative to body size of any known vertebrate. This adaptation allowed it to hunt in dimly lit depths. It fed on squid, fish, and smaller marine reptiles. Its body, powered by a vertical tail fin reminiscent of that of sharks, could reach high speeds in short bursts. Unlike plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young, an exceptional trait among prehistoric reptiles. Remarkably preserved fossils show embryos inside females and even individuals fossilized in the very act of giving birth. This demonstrates that they were entirely adapted to the water, incapable of returning to land even for reproduction. The young were born tail first, just like modern cetaceans, avoiding the risk of suffocation during birth. The plesiosaurs, on the other hand, represented a very different evolutionary model. Their bodies were more robust, and their limbs had transformed into 4 powerful flippers that allowed them to fly underwater with wide rhythmic strokes. Within this lineage, 2 major morphotypes emerged, the long-necked plesiosaurs with small heads and the short-necked pliosaurs with massive skulls, true super-predators of their ecosystem. Among the most iconic plesiosaurs was Cryptoclydus, a reptile with an extraordinarily flexible neck that used its reach to probe through schools of fish, small cephalopods, and other agile prey. Its narrow jaws and long teeth allowed it to grip slippery animals without requiring enormous bite force. This feeding style, more akin to that of a wading bird underwater than to a shark, defined its ecological role as a precision predator in temperate seas. In contrast, the pliosaurs of the late Jurassic were genuine hunting machines. The gigantic Pliosaurus reached lengths of up to 12 meters, with a skull that could exceed 2 meters in length. Its jaws, equipped with conical teeth more than 20 centimeters long, delivered crushing forces capable of splintering bone. Pliosaurs occupied the role of marine super-predators, feeding on smaller plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, giant fish, and even young pliosaurs. The balance of the Jurassic oceans depended heavily on their presence, much like sharks regulate modern marine food webs. At the anatomical level, the differences between plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs illustrate 2 successful but divergent evolutionary strategies. Ichthyosaurs relied on speed, leaps, and rapid chases. Plesiosaurs, on the other hand, depended on maneuverability and attacks from unexpected angles. Long-necked plesiosaurs rarely acted as ambush predators because their flexible neck could generate a wide attack radius without the need to move their entire body. Pliosaurs, however, were powerful ambushers, capable of accelerating quickly and striking with devastating bites. The Jurassic oceans also housed abundant prey. Ammonites, belemnites, primitive bony fish, and large prehistoric sharks provided a constant food supply. The diversity of species allowed plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs to coexist without competing directly for millions of years. This coexistence was maintained thanks to ecological partitioning. Each group occupied specific niches that prevented excessive overlap among marine predators. Migration, another common trait among marine reptiles, was likely part of the lives of these giants. Seasonal changes in temperature, food availability, and reproductive patterns drove many ichthyosaurs to travel long distances. Plesiosaurs, though slower, may also have migrated, especially the long-necked ones, following schools of fish that fluctuated according to climatic cycles. A fascinating aspect of Jurassic marine reptiles is the physiology that allowed them to thrive in demanding environments. The dense bone structure of some plesiosaurs suggests they could dive to moderate depths while maintaining controlled buoyancy. In contrast, the lightweight skeleton of ichthyosaurs favored deep dives and rapid ascents. Their large eyes, accompanied by a robust sclerotic ring, protected the eyeballs from pressure and allowed vision in low light conditions. The marine Jurassic fossil record also includes a vast collection of footprints and marks in coastal sediments, remains of stranded individuals, and complete skeletons preserved in fine limestones, which has enabled detailed anatomical reconstructions. Thanks to these findings, marine paleontology became an essential discipline for understanding the evolution of aquatic vertebrates and their transition from land to sea. Despite their long-lasting success, ichthyosaurs began to decline toward the end of the late Jurassic. Changes in ocean composition, competition with other predators, and transformations in marine currents altered their dominance. Plesiosaurs, on the other hand, diversified their lineages and persisted until the late Cretaceous, eventually coexisting with the first mosasaurs and giant sharks. The first giant, pterosaurs, flying creatures that dominated the skies. In a world where sauropods rose like living mountains and the oceans teemed with formidable predators, the Jurassic skies became yet another stage of grandeur. The creatures that dominated them were not birds, these were only beginning to evolve toward the end of the Jurassic, but pterosaurs, the first vertebrates capable of active flight. Among them emerged the first winged giants, beings whose membranous wings cast shadows in the air as broad as those of some modern light aircraft. The origin of pterosaurs dates back to the Triassic, but it was during the Jurassic that they diversified and reached larger sizes, conquering niches that ranged from coastal predators to opportunistic scavengers. Although the most colossal species would appear in the Cretaceous, the giant Jurassic pterosaurs were pioneers in demonstrating how far evolution could push the concept of flight in reptiles. One of the most representative genera of the late Jurassic was Pterodactylus, a relatively small pterosaur compared to later giants, but crucial for understanding the transition toward larger flying animals. Pterodactylus had a wingspan of about 1.5 meters, but its aerodynamic anatomy laid the foundation for larger pterosaurs such as the ctenochasmatines and the campylognathoids, whose descendants would dominate the skies of the Cretaceous. Among the first giant pterosaurs of the Jurassic, Rhamphorhynchus stands out, a long-tailed flying reptile with wingspans exceeding 2 meters. Although not enormous by later standards, its importance lies in its combination of active flight with adaptations for fishing and hunting in marine environments. Its jaws, equipped with interlocking conical teeth perfect for catching slippery fish, made it a highly specialized aerial predator. The wing membranes, supported by a disproportionately long fourth finger, extended from the body to the tip of the tail, ensuring stability during flight. Unlike bats, whose wings are supported by several fingers, pterosaurs had developed a unique structure. A single extremely elongated finger supported the main membrane, while the hind limbs contributed to the lower portion of the wing. This design offered a blend of maneuverability and energy efficiency unmatched among flying reptiles. Thanks to these adaptations, some Jurassic pterosaurs were capable of covering long distances by gliding on rising air currents, while others performed quick maneuvers to capture flying or aquatic prey. But the true winged giants of the late Jurassic emerged within the group of early pterodactyloids, which featured longer necks, elongated skulls, and a significant reduction of the tail. This new body shape allowed for more stable and efficient flight, ideal for the progressive increase in size. Genera such as Ctenochasma and Germanodactylus represent this morphological shift. Although they did not exceed wingspans of 3 meters, their lightweight skeletal structure and slender skulls foreshadowed the appearance of truly gigantic pterosaurs in the future. These early giants possessed an extraordinarily pneumatic skeleton. Their bones were filled with cavities that lightened their weight, a trait shared with modern birds. However, unlike birds, pterosaurs had an extensive system of air sacs that not only reduced bone density, but also allowed continuous ventilation during flight, increasing their endurance and ability to gain altitude. The diversity of pterosaurs in the late Jurassic was impressive. While some specialized in fishing from the air, others fed on giant insects, carrion, or small terrestrial creatures. Fossil remains reveal stomachs filled with whole fish, filtering dental adaptations, and pointed beaks designed to capture fast-moving prey. In this aerial ecosystem, competition was fierce and constant. The Jurassic skies also presented considerable risks, such as sudden storms, strong updrafts, and terrestrial predators that could surprise pterosaurs when they rested on beaches or cliffs. These were constant threats. Their ability to take off quickly from the ground, using a powerful catapult jump with both their hind and forelimbs, was a key adaptation for avoiding attacks and surviving in an environment full of dangers. Although there is no evidence that Jurassic pterosaurs lived in large colonies like modern birds, some findings suggest complex social behavior. Deposits of eggs and clustered nests indicate that some species may have reproduced in common areas using beaches and coastal dunes to bury their eggs under moist sand. The hatchlings, born with fully formed wings but fragile bones, likely spent their first weeks hiding among rocks or coastal vegetation until they developed enough skill to fly. The expansion of giant Jurassic pterosaurs also played an important role in ecological dynamics. By feeding on fish and crustaceans, they exerted pressure on marine populations. By scavenging remains left by other predators, they reduced the spread of disease. Their long-range flight allowed them to disperse nutrients by defecating over land or sea, a subtle but effective way of contributing to the biological cycle of the ecosystem. Despite all these adaptations, the Jurassic giants were only the precursors of even more colossal pterosaurs that would appear millions of years later, such as Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans exceeding 10 meters. Nevertheless, it was these Jurassic pioneers who first demonstrated that a reptile could conquer the air in a sustained way, an evolutionary achievement that would forever change the natural history of the planet. Jurassic flora, colossal forests that enabled the existence of giant herbivores. The splendor of Jurassic giants would not have been possible without an equally extraordinary plant world. Long before flowers dominated Cretaceous landscapes, Jurassic ecosystems were composed of colossal forests where conifers, tree ferns, cicadophytes, araucarias, ginkgos, and horsetails grew in densities that have no direct modern equivalent. These plants not only fed titanic sauropods such as Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Camarasaurus, but also shaped the climate, regulated water cycles, and created ecological niches that favored the diversification of countless species. To grasp the magnitude of these forests, one need only imagine a combination of tropical rainforest, temperate woodland, and humid swamp coexisting on the same continent. High concentrations of carbon dioxide and globally elevated temperatures fostered exuberant plant growth. With no sharply defined seasons across much of the planet, many plants grew year-round, producing enough biomass to sustain herbivores that consumed hundreds of kilograms of vegetation daily. One of the most imposing components of Jurassic flora were the conifers, particularly those belonging to now extinct families such as the Chirolepidiaceae, a group of conifers that was both common and diverse. These trees could reach heights of more than 40 meters and formed dense forests in relatively dry regions. Their tall, straight trunks created an elevated canopy layer from which long-necked herbivores such as Brachiosaurus fed, relying on these treetops for fibrous, cellulose-rich leaves. In wetter areas, tree ferns thrived, some of which could exceed 10 meters in height. These plants, together with horsetails that grew in thick stands near rivers, formed the dietary base of dinosaurs such as Diplodocus and Apatosaurus, specialists at stripping large volumes of vegetation at low and medium heights. The interaction between giant herbivores and tree ferns created continuous ecological cycles. Sauropods opened clearings by toppling plants, allowing the rapid regeneration of young shoots thanks to the warm, humid climate. Another fundamental group were the cycads, plants that resemble palms but are phylogenetically very different. With thick trunks and rigid leaves, cycads dominated many open areas of the Jurassic. Their reproduction relied on large cones and pine cone-like structures that produced nutritious seeds, which may have been eaten by small mammals and reptiles. Although their toughness made them less appealing to some herbivores, species such as Camarasaurus were equipped to process more resistant plant fibers and likely included these plants in their diet. Araucarias, ancestors of modern monkey puzzle trees of the southern hemisphere, form some of the most majestic forests of the Jurassic. Their presence has been confirmed in many regions of North America, Europe, and South America. With enormous trunks and horizontal branches, these trees created wide expanses of shade and stabilized eroded soils. Giant sauropods found a nutritious source of tough leaves in Araucarias, which their digestive tracts could ferment for days thanks to large internal chambers where microorganisms broke down plant compounds. Ginkgos, at that time almost identical to those that still exist today, thrived in the temperate climates of the Jurassic. Their resilience to climatic change and their longevity made them crucial components of mixed forests. Although their leaves were not as abundant as those of conifers or ferns, their presence reflected the botanical diversity of the period. The structure of Jurassic forests varied by region. In higher elevation zones, where soils were poorer, hardy conifers predominated, forming dense and relatively dry forests. In low-lying areas near rivers and lakes, the vegetation was lush. Ferns, horsetails, and cycads intertwined in dense thickets that grew rapidly. These humid environments fueled frenetic life cycles, providing constant resources for herbivores of all sizes. The flora also played a fundamental role in climate regulation. The transpiration of the Jurassic's gigantic forests created humid microclimates that favored frequent storms. The soils, rich in organic matter accumulated over millions of years, sustained almost unlimited growth. Due to the absence of flowering plants, wind-dispersed pollen and reproductive cones dominated the interaction between plants and fauna. Bees did not yet exist, but primitive insects and air currents ensured the continuation of these plant species. The impact of flora on the giant herbivores was evident in their biology. The long necks of sauropods emerged as an evolutionary response to the need to reach different plant layers without moving their enormous bodies. Fermentation-based digestion, the ability to process plant material of low nutritional quality, and the expansion of pneumatic cavities in their skeletons were all linked to a world where vegetation was abundant but fibrous and difficult to break down. Herbivores such as Stegosaurus also depended on Jurassic flora. Its dorsal plates, possibly used to regulate temperature, reflected the thermal variations created by forests and open areas. Its diet, based on low-growing plants, allowed it to survive in regions where ferns and horsetails grew abundantly under the shade of tall conifers. Flora also influenced species dispersal. The expansion of conifer forests, connected by natural corridors, enabled the seasonal migration of sauropods between distant regions. These movements, in turn, favored the spread of seeds that adhered to the bodies of herbivores or were transported within their digestive systems. A cycle of constant interaction was established between the terrestrial giants and the forests that sustained them. The plant base of the Jurassic also supported the predators. Allosaurus, Pterosaurus, and other theropods depended directly on the health and abundance of herbivore populations, making flora the primary link in the entire ecological network. Without continuous plant growth, the giants would not have thrived, and the apex predators would not have reached the levels of diversification we know. Competition and apex predators, how the titans coexisted and what kept them in balance. The late Jurassic was an age of giants. Not only did some of the largest sauropods ever to exist live side by side, but so did predators of impressive size and power, along with armored herbivores capable of inflicting lethal wounds. The coexistence of such colossal creatures, from Supersaurus and Brachiosaurus to Allosaurus and Stegosaurus, was not the result of chance, but the reflection of an extraordinarily complex ecological balance. Each species depended on others, directly or indirectly, for survival. And within that delicate system, competition, predation, and specialization played essential roles. To understand that balance, one must first imagine the Morrison Formation as a living mosaic: dense conifer forests, swamps overflowing with horsetails, open plains dominated by cycads, and slow rivers winding between sand and clay terraces. In this landscape, giant herbivores moved in numbers that would be difficult to imagine today. The mere presence of thousands of tons of animal biomass in a relatively limited area created constant pressure on the vegetation, However, direct competition rarely reached critical levels thanks to feeding stratification. Diplodocus swept low and riverside zones searching for soft vegetation. Apatosaurus tore tougher branches at mid-height. Brachiosaurus towered above all others to reach foliage no other herbivore could touch. Camarasaurus adopted a versatile diet that combined intermediate layers with more resistant plants. This natural segmentation reduced competition among giant herbivores and allowed several species to coexist in the same space without exhausting shared resources. Mobility was also key. Sauropods moved constantly, migrating according to water and food availability. Their routes, some possibly used for generations, prevented the depletion of specific areas. Moving in large herds, they opened clearings that facilitated plant regeneration. Flora responded, reproduced, and grew back, fueling a continuous cycle that supported gigantism for millions of years. However, where colossal herbivores thrived, predators capable of taking them down also emerged. In the Morrison Formation, the dominant apex predator was Allosaurus, but it did not hunt alone nor compete in isolation. It shared the landscape with Pterosaurus and Ceratosaurus, each occupying a different niche that prevented carnivore competition from becoming unsustainable. Pterosaurus was bulkier, perhaps adapted to ambushes and close-range attacks. Ceratosaurus, smaller and more agile, preferred riverside areas where it fished and hunted smaller prey. Allosaurus dominated open plains, targeting juvenile sauropods and medium-sized herbivores. This spontaneous territorial division reduced direct clashes and maintained balance among predators. Carnivores also did not depend exclusively on hunting live prey. Carrion, whether from accidental falls, old age, disease, or drought, provided enough food to avoid major conflicts. A 20-ton carcass could feed several theropods for days, attracting small mammals, opportunistic pterosaurs, and even other carnivorous dinosaurs. The equilibrium also depended on physiological factors. Apex predators did not need to eat every day. Like modern reptiles and large birds, they could go long periods without food after a substantial meal. This metabolic efficiency reduced pressure on herbivore populations, allowing ecosystems to remain stable even during times of scarcity. A crucial aspect of ecological balance was constant natural selection. Predators eliminated sick, young, or elderly individuals, thereby strengthening herbivore populations. This dynamic, far from weakening the group, increased its resilience. Without efficient predators, sauropods could have consumed entire regions to the point of collapse. Competition also existed within species. Young sauropods competed for protection within herds, fighting for safer positions among the group. Males of certain lineages may have competed in physical displays involving neck strikes, shoving, or rubbing massive bodies to gain access to females, although direct fossil evidence of this behavior is limited. Theropods, for their part, competed for hunting territories. Bite marks on Allosaurus bones indicate fights between individuals, perhaps over prey or social dominance. In this world without flowers, without modern grasses, and without large mammals, it was reptiles that defined every aspect of the landscape. The absence of small herbivores capable of consuming tender vegetation on a large scale allowed Jurassic forests to grow without being completely devoured. At the same time, the presence of giant herbivores shaped the terrain on scales we now associate only with human or geological activity. The warm and humid climate also played a central role. Seasonal rains ensured plant regeneration, and the climatic cycles, although intense, maintained refuge zones where populations could recover. Even natural fires, which were fairly frequent due to the abundance of resin-rich conifers, contributed to the balance. They renewed forests and created mosaics of young vegetation, perfect for specialized herbivores. The stability of the late Jurassic was not eternal. Changes in ocean currents, variations in oxygen levels, and geological transformations began to alter ecosystems toward the end of the period. The titans that had dominated for millions of years began to give way to smaller and more efficient species of the early Cretaceous. The Age of Giants did not end abruptly, but gradually as climate and flora changed.